This is the Sunday stream opening song because the other song is copyrighted. La 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 la. Oh, look, here comes Dog Cat Fox.
Hi, Sky.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunday stream. The stream I do on Sundays because Sunday is the day to stream. On Sundays. Hope you're all doing well this morning, this beautiful morning, Sunday morning. It's been a week, and it's going to be busy at the beginning of next week because it's month end, and month end billing starts and all that fun stuff. So, why don't we relax with a look at diversity recruiting? Because, that's a relaxing pastime, right? Right. Yeah, it is. This one jumped out at me, not literally, but figuratively, because of a particular word in its presentation title. If you'll recall, last week, it was last week, wasn't it? Yes, when we looked at, what was it again? Oh, yeah, CRT in schools and things. A particular word was used over and over again by our speakers that sounded like it was just filler. It didn't sound like it meant anything, but they kept using it as though it meant something. And that word is holistic. What is holistic? Well, an easy synonym for holistic is comprehensive, right? Looking at everything rather than just individual parts. That's all it really means, right? It's like, the arm is broken. Let us only look at the arm and not the other arm that is also broken, right? It's, you have to look at everything. That's all it is. Although people use it as though it's some kind of like magical incantation or something, that it's some kind of high-minded, enlightened way of seeing the world. And it could be, depending on the situation. But anyway, so that's what brought this to my attention. So I thought I'd look and find out more from a completely different group of people as to what diversity recruiting is. Although this is diversity beyond recruiting, building your holistic DEI strategy. I can't wait. And this was sponsored by Comcast, NBC Universal. And they say that several times. At least they say it several times in the bits and pieces that I cut out at the beginning, because at the beginning, they spend a lot of time talking about the organization that they work for and what they do, and it has nothing to do with the presentation. So if you want to watch the full introduction pieces, the link to the originals in the description. In brief, and I'm not doing it all the justice that it requires, but in brief, the organization doing this presentation start out helps LGBTQ entrepreneurs and their businesses. That's putting it very simply, but that's the gist. So there you go. All right. Well, before we get into it, who is joining me on this beautiful morning, Sunday morning? Matt Barnes, Somnamnul Nation, Mike R, Swirl Blue, Hell Triangle, Arc 210, Toku, Nobody Not Me, J2021, Deco, The Magister, Absolutely Degenerate, Megan Ring, Green Death, Lurking Gopher, Non-Vitae Rex, Bishop, Ebony Williams, Lexi Mads is here, Bridget, Brittany Holland. Good morning to you all. And for those of you here already or in the future, if you'll take a look at the link that is pinned at the top of the chat box, that is to a GoFundMe for a family that is friends of Shady Grin, and they are in need of some help. So if you happen to have a couple of extra bucks that you can pass their way, please consider doing so. Let's take a look at that. Johnny Hellcat, also good morning. All right, so let's get into it. This runs just under an hour. I'm only going to go for an hour and a half in real time per usual, unless there is some compelling reason to continue beyond that, as usual. Thank you, Hell Triangle. Why does every DEI expert suck at presenting concrete, tried and true strategies? They only speak in the abstract. Well, that's kind of the holy grail I keep searching for. It is not often. I can't say it's never been the case, right? But it is not often the case that when listening to diversity, equity, and inclusion officers or experts or consultants, that you get actual, tangible, examples of what to do, or this is how you do it, or this is how you achieve this thing. So that's why I keep looking at these things after a fashion and try to find different groups of people and different comported experts each time, because I want to see, like, is somebody going to pull back the curtain? It has happened a couple of times. right? But only a couple. So it's always interesting to see how they present this information. And I mean, the question in my mind is, when I'm listening to these things, is this the same information and guidance they would provide a paying client? Or are they holding back the secret mix of spices until they actually have a paid gig? I don't know. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. Anyway, diversity beyond recruiting, building your holistic DEI strategy. The first minute or two may have some jumps in it as I cut out the non-related information, but after that we'll be free and clear. And otherwise, I have not listened to this ahead of time. Okay, all that. Let me know if you can hear this. Let's go.
We have a great amount of people who've already joined, so I'm going to get us kicked off. Welcome to the first Start Out event of 2022.
Okay, you guys hear that all right? Let me know in the chat. Ostsan, good morning. Let's see. Resolute Germ, if I didn't already say good morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to you. We're all in our places with bright shining faces.
I'm so excited to have you all here. I'm excited to be welcoming these guests.
I'm excited that you're excited.
As well as providing the space for the conversation around diversity beyond recruiting and building your holistic DEI strategy. Without further ado, without waxing too poetic for
I skipped over all the waxing poetic stuff. Yeah.
Everyone out there, I would love to introduce you to our incredible panel of speakers, but first and foremost, by kicking it over to Brad, who is our moderator for today.
Oh boy,
Thank you everybody for joining. Without further ado, take it away, Brad.
Brad, Janet, Rocky. Brad, Janet, Rocky.
Awesome. Thank you, Emma, and a big thank you again to all of the hard work that the Start Out HQ does. I'm Brad Dressler. I am on the programming board for Start Out. This is my 5th year. So obviously, I love being involved with this organization. I hope you all will love attending future events and maybe getting involved somehow with Start Out in the future yourself.
Well, this is my first Start Out event to witness. So I guess this will be the litmus test whether I come back to this channel again in the future.
My background is in education and marketing.
Education and marketing? Wow, that's kind of 2 areas that I've looked at quite a bit over the years.
In the tech space, worked at large corporations. I've worked at startups. So and nonprofits too. So I've seen a wide variety of different aspects of business and how people approach diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Well, and you're the kind of speaker that I like to listen to because whether I end up agreeing with you or not, or finding use in what you have to say, at least I know that you are well experienced in the field you are speaking about, which is always helpful.
And that's why I wanted to organize this today. This event is important to me. I'm very passionate about it as a queer man, but also I really want to see there be more discussions about strategy across the board in different aspects of businesses, and not just the recruiting and retention are extremely important for sure, but we want to be thinking holistically about DEI. So that's what.
Yeah, that's what I want to. I guess that's the point I want to learn here. What does it mean to be holistic about DEI? Because the elements of DEI always seem very, how shall I say, surface level, right? I mean, you measure DEI by demographics. Right, the demographic makeup of your workforce, first and foremost. And we're talking about like the most common denominator demographics. Race, gender, orientation are the sort of the marquee demographics that you're looking at when doing DEI. So how do you have a holistic strategy for achieving DEI? I guess that's, well, okay, let me back up a little bit. Depending on how they frame it, that might be only the diversity part, because the whole equity and inclusion part can be more abstract depending on who the speaker is. So we'll see.
What today's conversation is going to be focused on. I'm going to hand it off to our panelists. I will go and hand it off to H first, and if H, you'll hand it over to somebody else, we'll go from there.
Hi, everybody. Really nice to be here. Appreciate the time to talk about these topics and sort of important questions and issues. I'm the founder and CEO of Hustle Up. We are a searchable network that connects creative talent in media and entertainment to each other and makes that talent discoverable to media and entertainment companies like NBC, Comcast.
Okay. Never heard of it. All right.
We went through the NBC Universal, Comcast, Lift Lab Accelerator powered by Techstars.
Every time I hear somebody like just in quasi-casual conversation start laying out what sounds completely like an ad, I think of the Truman Show, where like his wife every 2 seconds is having to basically do a whole advertisement for a pancake syrup or something.
In 2021, we just finished it about 3 months ago, and we're about to launch our invite-only beta next week, actually, here in Los Angeles. So we're working with organizations like Women in Film, Outfest, the National Association of Latino Independent Producers.
Sorry, I'm sorry, Latino. I think you missed the memo.
NAACP and others to make sure we have lots of diverse creative talent on our platform.
Okay.
Abel.
Awesome. Thank you, H.
This guy looks familiar to me. Have I seen him on another Abel? And I'm not being facetious. I'm honestly like, have we seen this guy in a different presentation before? Maybe, I don't know.
My name is Abel. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. And I am currently a product owner at Marmoset, which is a music licensing and production company.
I swear we have seen him in a different presentation before. That sounds way too familiar. Have we? Okay, I'm gonna stop trying to figure it out, but I'm pretty sure we've seen him before.
And the only certified B Corp in the music industry. And I am also a community leader for Out in Tech, and specifically with the Portland chapter as well as the QT BIPOC committee.
Okay.
And I will pass it to Daphne.
Thank you. So my name is Daphne LeBlanc. I am a marketer, I guess, by nature. I started my career in a really different path than probably a lot of people. And I started in nonprofit.
Well, a lot of people start in one part of the world and end up in a different one, but okay.
So I started from the bottom up and man, this is going to date me, but there was nothing called digital marketing when I started marketing.
Well, I mean, you're kind of, I guess I'm dating myself in that way too. Although I wasn't really into the workforce until after the internet had kind of started up, more or less. So, yeah, okay.
And we're going to pretend that everyone else on this panel is in the same age bracket.
Okay.
But I'm really excited to have this conversation because I think that it often gets stuck in just the human resource kind of recruiting arena, and it really should be a bigger spoke topic.
Well, I mean, obviously I can't speak for every company or anything, but DEI classically is always said to be more than just an HR issue. On multiple occasions, it has been preached, let's say, that DEI cannot be just an HR concern. So maybe it still is in a lot of places, but that's not the through line I've heard by so many other consultants. So how common is it that when you're talking specifically about DEI, that it is only regulated now to HR? I don't know.
For everyone. Thanks.
Thanks for those intros and thanks for being here. We appreciate you making the time.
Speaking of time, appreciation to the speakers for not each taking 20 minutes to give their introduction/speeches. I remember a couple of these types of things in the past where somebody said, we can just introduce yourself, and then somebody goes into like a 20-minute recitation of their entire life and philosophy or something. So good on them.
all these panelists, they volunteer their time and talent and their knowledge. So we really appreciate them. So let's get started. Let's jump into it. Again,
let's get this
as the audience
started,
is
right?
listening, if you think of questions or there's something we haven't really discussed that you would love for us to talk about, we may or may not have answers, but we can always share a perspective and some information what we have. So feel free to put those questions in the Q&A box. So let's jump into it with, this is going to be a question for all the panelists.
Okay.
I would like to hear from each of you. What's one area specifically that you think is kind of overlooked when it comes to DEI discussions? Like what, and for just, one area, then would you share one tip or best practice you think might be valuable to consider in that area? So like, one example for me, and I won't actually give the full answer, but if I were to say
an example, examples. I love examples because I rarely ever get examples, but okay. Yes. All right. Before we get into what he has to say. All right. One area that's overlooked. All right. And those of you that have joined me for more than a few of these things, we'll have to see if they bring up anything that we've never heard of before or have rarely heard of before and see if overlooked actually applies. And then what would they do to resolve it? Okay, give us your example.
Perhaps external marketing or perhaps internal communications, those kind of things.
External marketing, internal communications. Okay, I'm going to need some more details.
So I'll hand it back over to Abe.
That wasn't an example. That was, well, I guess it was technically an example, but now I'm starving for more information.
It's to start with, and then whoever wants to jump in after that can jump in.
No, set an order. You're the moderator. Make it very structured. Just go in the order that you did the introductions. Go from H to Abel to, I forget the lady's name. Just go in that order. Don't leave it chaotic.
Thanks, Brad. Look, I think one of the things that's really interesting about this panel is trying to talk about diversity from the perspective of not just recruiting talent, but actually how to create a culture internal to your company that's meaningful to make people happy.
Make people happy. Oh, okay. Is that one of the goals? Huh. All right. Yes. Well, you're tackling some very broad areas because recruiting and then creating culture are two completely different things. So, can we get specific?
Or help them have an enriched experience, and also to retain them, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I'll just kind of give a little bit of my background.
He didn't ask for your background. He asked for one area in DEI that you think is overlooked, but okay.
I've been out in my career since I started working. I was out in high school and college. I have seen, heard, and experienced it all. And some of it has not been the most positive of experiences. The world is changing, but I think, we can all do a lot more to change our part of it in the way that we build culture and build, the infrastructure of our companies that makes it an inclusive and diverse place.
How?
think a lot of diverse talent, especially, feel the burden of representing an entire community.
Okay. Well, I'd be curious to know who is requiring anybody to quote unquote represent an entire community. I'm also endlessly curious when it comes to, specifically when it comes to DEI insofar as recruiting for orientation. How does an employer go about broaching that subject with a potential hire? Right? I mean, if someone doesn't have any interest or see any need to discuss their private lives in that way, what do you do about that? Right? What if my love life is nobody's business at the office? That of all the other different sort of demographics that they generally focus on, that's the one that I'm always kind of curious about. How do you determine that? Right? You know, how do you make sure? There was a story not too long ago, I think it was Goldman Sachs, who they said something, and it may still be true. I haven't looked in a while. They said they would not do any IPOs with any company that did not have a diverse board of directors. And one of those elements of diversity was orientation. And I'm like, I would be curious to know how Goldman Sachs goes about verifying the orientation of a particular board member. Anyway.
And that burden often means not necessarily being true to yourself. And that can be a very exhausting experience, right? So I think one of the things that I think is important is to create a culture where people don't feel like they have to do what's called covering oftentimes in HR parlance, right? Where people don't feel like they can dress or behave the way they want to because it will, be earmarked as a particular stereotype, right?
Okay, so you think this is overlooked. So dress code. Okay, well, what it would be an appropriate dress code policy then, in your opinion? And I know I'm asking rhetorically, but I would assume that's where this is going.
Right? Or they don't want to talk about their relationships if they're gay or their affiliations.
Do they have to? I mean, again, some things are fairly obvious just on sight, right? But why should someone feel compelled if they don't want to? This is the thing. It's like, if I don't want to express to you what I do in my private life, is that a detriment to my prospects? Or are you thinking that I'm a victim because I choose not to behave or dress in a way that you would assume I would, depending on my sexual orientation, if that was something you knew about in the first place? This is the really weird area of DEI. Again, like I said, this, of all the things, this is the one that I'm always kind of like, how do you broach that subject, and why is it anybody else's business?
They don't want to talk about certain topics related to their identity because they think they'll be perceived as being strident.
How do you tell the difference between someone who is feeling like they can't talk about these things and someone who has no interest in talking about these things? I'm just curious.
They don't want to talk about their associations because, again, it feels like that will somehow out them in their workplace, right?
Well, what if they do? Okay, I'm going to end up asking the same question 17 times. But anyway, thank you, Hell Triangle, again. Think these DEI experts cringe when they learn a group of only South Korean men helped create the first system of 5G. I don't know. Or who's responsible for the internet, right? Or what went into the creation of their smartphones and so on. I don't know. It's just, but okay. All right. Just insert my same question block here for as we go on in this particular portion.
Right. And so I think one of the things that is important to the culture that we're creating at Hustle Up and other cultures that I've tried to create previously is to really create a safe space with a lot of active listening of our employees and to not assume certain things, to really engage employees in conversations.
Not assume certain things, like someone's hesitance to talk about their personal life is them being oppressed or something.
To create resource groups or affinity groups.
Affinity groups? Oh boy, my favorite.
And encourage everybody to join them so that there's not stigma around being part of an employee resource group.
Employee resource group / affinity group. Oh man. Oh, it is a red letter day. Oh, when those two things are finally admitted to being basically the same thing. Yes. ERGs and affinity groups. Yeah. Divvy yourselves up on the basis of surface characteristics, guys. That creates a sense of unity in the company and encourage you to join a group. Yeah. Declare your allegiance to this particular thing that has absolutely nothing with your ability to do your job. but spend part of your workday and your real life dedicated to the company's diversity initiative.
And creating really clear and safe procedures with regard to feedback and reporting, where people feel like there's a culture that allows them to talk about issues that they're having in a way that isn't penalizing, right? And the last thing I'll kind of say is I think, it's really important to encourage and kind of normalize language in the workplace.
Oh, language policing. Okay. Tell us more.
That feels inclusive and feels progressive in terms of diversity.
Oh, okay.
Where no one person, again, feels like they have to always be the one to be speaking up or confronting stereotypes. And I
like what? I mean, I'll stipulate that whatever you're talking about has some basis in reality for what you've experienced. Okay, what stereotypes? Give us an example, even if it's a hypothetical. Give me a hypothetical example based on fact in your own company or in own cultures, like something that's happened. Just so I have an idea of what you're talking about.
I think one of the really useful ways to do that that I've found is through really authentic storytelling.
Authentic storytelling. Authentic. We're getting all the magic words today. Okay, what is an authentic storytelling thing?
And fostering authentic storytelling rather than labels and stereotypes, and really fostering ways to become allies to each other.
What does this mean? What does any of this mean? Mechanically speaking, okay, on the ground, in the office space, what does this look like? Give me an active example.
Through our personal stories and
why is my personal story your business? I'm coming at this as though I just want to go to work. Okay, I'm just going to work to do my job. All right. I mean, unless my job involves the sharing of my personal life or something, and I'm sure there are jobs out there like that or something, but otherwise, if I'm just going to work to do my job, to clock in, do my bit, clock out, what does any of this have to do with my ability to just do that? Can I choose not to participate in these extraneous things, and will I be penalized or marginalized or looked down upon or less favored for promotion going along in such a culture? I guess that's my question.
And the relationships and trust you build in the workplace when you have that open culture.
Thanks, H.
Do you mind if I jump in? Oh, sorry.
Yeah, jump in. Go for it. Go for it.
And Daphne, correct? Okay, I think I forgot that along the way.
I'm right there with you, H. And I think that something that is often overlooked, it's pretty much I think it's a combo. It's the fact that DEI is a collective. So
no. That is not overlooked. DEI as a collective mindset is not overlooked. Trust me. No, that is well known. Very, very well known.
So I think that one of the things that we miss out all the time is that educational component.
Because
I find that people are so fixated on this metric. Oh, I need to have enough Asians. I need to have enough LGBTQ. I need to have enough Black. I need to have enough women.
Yeah, that is often a component. And whatever else you might say about DEI initiatives, that one in particular is probably the biggest problem on both a legal level and a, fairness level. But it is there. It is there in the diversity component, if nothing else. How do you overcome that part? And is this an admission that is a consideration in your hiring and or promotion practices? Because if so...
why don't we actually take a step back, have this collective conversation, and maybe...
Oh no, she froze. That's not me. She froze. I think, right? Yes. I didn't freeze, right? I'm still broadcasting, aren't I? Oh boy, how long does this go on for?
Yeah. Because they don't know how to handle it. So I think that that's one area that.
Oh, okay. So that was entirely the original broadcast. She froze up, and we missed whatever she had to say. Hopefully, they'll have her back up and repeat. That was not. That wasn't me. I hope.
Is really overlooked because everyone is kind of teetering. I don't know if I should say this. Well, you don't know until you try and actually have a real, authentic relationship. So I love how you said that, H, these authentic stories, because people need to hear them.
Why does anybody need to hear my story? You know, I mean, outside, and don't get me wrong, I'm not talking like I believe everybody should go to work and just be a robot or something, right? Okay, that's not what I mean. But why is my personal life your business? Right? I mean, if I just go and do my job and I don't bother anybody, and that's all I want to do, and just imagine the hypothetical worker who just sees this as a job, does not see the job as their life, and just wants to go and do their job and go home and live their life. Right? Why is that not acceptable? Why do I have to share my whole self or my authentic story? You know, beyond work relationships. If I have a good working relationship with the people at the office, can that be enough?
People need to hear, how does it feel that, you know, someone looks at me and they're like, hey, Daphne, what are you? You don't look whole.
Excuse me? Daphne, what are you? You don't look whole? What? Thank you, Keeper Dam. Sorry, I'm late. Slept in, catching up. Don't worry. We're still kind of into the introduction phase of things, so it's fine. Thank you, Keeper Dam. And it'll be here for you in the future, purportedly. What are you? You don't look whole. Okay.
Huh? What does that mean?
I don't know. What does that mean? And is that, I mean, did that happen at the workplace? What are you? You don't look whole.
I don't look whole.
Yeah, it sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And anybody who would say that sounds like a moron, wouldn't they? Is that exemplative of common occurrence in the workplace for you? Like, what?
Well, I don't know if you're this or if you're that, and now your hair looks like this, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's almost like all of these things are ridiculously irrelevant, aren't they? Gosh, if only DEI saw it that way.
I'm like, but at the same token,
what?
I feel
the same token. Oh, was that a Freudian slip?
Like, you know what? You were brave enough to take me to the side.
What?
And have that conversation.
Are you? What? What is that? What the fuck is that?
Okay, all right. You're going to give somebody credit for taking you aside and having the private conversation of what are you? Really? That isn't an immediate HR reporting right there, and I wouldn't blame you if you did. What are you? You don't look whole. I mean, aside from just being like flabbergasted at whatever the heck that person was trying to say, you would give them credit for that. For being brave enough to have that conversation. What?
So I think it's twofold.
What?
You know, education and understanding that DEI is a collective.
I'm going to have to assume, in the absence of more information, that some valuable part of context was lost when her camera froze up. That's something she said prior to this makes that make more sense, because that did not make any sense whatsoever. I'm sorry. I have no idea what. Okay, she starts out by saying it can't just be we need this amount of this person and this amount of this person. And then somebody comes up to her and tries to assess what she is. Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely +1 to the authentic stories. And
give me an authentic story. Give me an example of an authentic story. What does it look like when someone shares their authentic story at the workplace? Under what circumstances does this occur? I mean, do you have like a morning team meeting, as was talked about in the previous TED Excellence, and you all talk about your authentic stories? How does that conversation start? If you're an employer, if you're a supervisor, how do you engage in an authentic conversation with an authentic story with a subordinate? How does that look? How does that work? What does that look like? I know I'm not going to get an answer, but I'm still curious.
Letting people use their own voices. And
whose voices would they use otherwise?
I think like another area that often gets overlooked is applying DEI to departments outside of people ops or HR. And
that is 100% not true. And I again, I don't know what our speaker has heard himself or otherwise. DEI being a company-wide imperative and philosophy is the most common declaration I have seen in the last 5 years in watching these things. You know, oftentimes they will open, DEI can't just be an HR concern. It needs to be a company-wide culture philosophy, something like that. Okay. So, I mean, admittedly, the companies, the organizations, the representatives thereof that I've looked at over the years constitute only a small portion of all the companies in the country, et cetera. So maybe I'm just in a bubble in that sense, but it is not uncommon. It is not an overlooked component to say that DEI should exist outside of HR. That seems to be more common than our speaker is implying.
And for example, my background is more technical, and a lot of times folks completely overlook applying DEI within a tech team.
Okay, how would you apply DEI within a tech team? I don't know what that means.
And same goes for like marketing team, business teams, every other team.
Okay, how do you apply DEI to a team? All right, so you are a technical individual. All right. How would you apply DEI to a tech team? What does that look like? What result do you get after doing that? What is the before? What is the after? How can I compare and contrast these two ideas?
Within an organization should also be involved with DEI initiatives.
Yeah,
and
right.
And that needs to be as collaborative an effort as possible.
Yeah, and that looks like what? What does that mean?
I know at Marmoset we have a diversity team.
Diversity team. Oh, joy.
ERG, an employee resource group, and
ERGs.
While we do have like our own meetings as a team, we frequently collaborate with all of the other teams across the organization.
Okay, why? How is that idea unique to a DEI philosophy? Right. Okay, or what is special about that collaboration within the DEI realm as compared to any other company that would have good communication between different departments? Like what is special about the DEI version of that?
on how can these other teams help us meet our DEI goals.
Okay, well, what is a DEI goal that collaboration will allow you to achieve, or give you a chance to achieve? Like, we keep getting closer and closer to specificity, but we're still just in the abstract. Like what?
And so, yeah, I think branching outside of just keeping DEI in the HR space is another important area.
Again, I rarely ever hear the idea that DEI should just be an HR concern. So, but you still haven't told us, what does it mean to have it outside of HR? What does it mean within a particular team? What does it mean in the way of collaboration? What goal are you attempting to reach in this collaboration? Still no specifics. Okay.
Yeah, all great points, and
what? All great points? Really?
+1 to everything.
+1 to everything. Really? No questions? Nothing?
All of you said, I think, yeah, I was reading an article recently about how when DEI is very siloed, it's ineffective. And also even there's conversations sort of now in the space about, what having a chief diversity officer is great from having a high level C-level exec, but how does that actually impact across the board?
Well, I've been asking that question for 5 years because I have listened to countless diversity, equity, and inclusion executives, diversity officers, etc. And every single time I listen to one of them try to describe what it is they do, it always comes out differently. And oftentimes it doesn't make any sense. And it's usually just as abstract as what our speakers here have said already. And in the early years, I don't know if I've heard it quite this often recently, but in the early years of doing my YouTube channel, more often than not, when an DEI officer was being interviewed about what they do, one of their first declarations would be, well, diversity means different things to different people. So I go to the employees and ask them, what does diversity mean to you? Which always made me laugh in my head. It's like, okay, so you got this job. Even you have no idea what it means to have this job. So you have to go ask the employees to tell you what your job is, I guess. That happened a lot, more often than you might think. But okay, yeah. So yeah, what does a DEI officer do? Executive.
So I think it's very important to think about the hierarchy, the structure, the reporting, the impact, like
how, like, good gravy. Give us an example, an active example. Things were this way before DEI, and then DEI made these changes, and this is where we are at. Why is that such an impossible task? Every single time I listen to one of these things.
It needs to be across all of your different
across all
primary areas. So if you're in a, like, let's say a tech space, hypothetically, there needs to be thoughts about that in the product space, in the HR space, in the marketing and community.
How? What thoughts need to be put into these spaces? Like what do I need to be thinking about that I wasn't thinking about before DEI came in? What specifically?
Communication spaces, all of those variables, and then some, like the customer service areas, the people ops, all of those variables need to be considered
how?
From DEI perspective,
what
and
perspective?
Not just hiring retention, but all of the different variables that impacted. Like,
no, it's like my brain constantly is making these cliffhangers. It's like I'm watching an old time serial, Flash Gordon or something, and we're coming to the end and we're literally on a cliffhanger. He's about to tell me something specific, and then all those kind of variables.
Like development of products, how we market and talk about products,
like how,
who we showcase in.
Who do you showcase? How do you talk? What does it do?
in advertising and marketing and whatnot. All of those things need to be considered across the board, but there needs to be a hierarchy. There needs to be a way to sort of make sure that's reported, right?
Okay, well, then tell me, what is an example hierarchy that you think works, or at least is a good idea? What is an example of a reporting system that you think is at least a good idea? Detail to me what, right now, after all of your experience, all your years, not naming a company, but just saying, okay, company X makes this widget, and in order to have an effective reporting system, they should do this, 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 and this. Why is that so beyond the reach of every single DEI expert or advocate that I listen to?
Right, and factored into the success as a KPI for whatever, whether it's you're a nonprofit, a startup, or a large corporation. You should have KPIs. You should have things you're measuring, and so you need to think about the structure and how is that actually measured and reported, and then how you continue to build upon that as a collective team, a company cross-wide.
Collective team, right?
All great points.
All great points. What, your points or their points? What?
Brad, I would just jump in and add that. I think that comes back to Daphne, what you were saying, not to put words in your mouth, but I think, what you were
Well, no, you wouldn't want to have her speak with any other voice than her own, right?
Saying about, like, we're all very concerned about making sure that we have, enough of various diversity categories, right?
You mean demographics? Yeah, that is a consideration. Yeah, one of the most interesting ones to me. Yes.
That's not the only metric. That's not the only KPI. And
okay, well, I'll tell you what. I believe you that it's not the only metric, but at whatever point in your DEI process you are weighing race, gender, orientation, etc., as a decision point, either in your hiring, your promotion, your retention, whatever, therein lies the problem. Regardless of any other metric you may apply, at whatever point you're using those things as a filter, that is the problem. Doesn't matter how much other things you pile on top.
That's really a KPI that's based on...
Okay, I am not a corporate linguist. What does KPI mean? Key performance indicator. Okay, so for my edification and everyone else, a key performance indicator. Knowing that definition now, and her referring back to what Daphne said, you need this amount of this type of person. Is someone's, as an example, racial demographic a key performance indicator? I would love to know, or love to see a chart describing what is indicated insofar as one's performance due to their race or their gender or their orientation. I am very curious about that now.
Recruiting numbers, it's not based on retention and on how to keep people happy and productive and fulfilled and upskilling and all the things that are challenging around internal culture and issues around diversity and equity and inclusion.
A lot of things were said just then. I don't feel like anything new was said or anything was revealed, except for the whole KPI thing. I'm going to keep that in mind. I'm going to keep that one in mind. Because if one's demographic is a KPI, it's the PI part of that is most interesting to me.
So I think that's something we all have to think about, like, how are we measuring success, right?
Yeah, that is a good point. How do you measure success? What does a successful DEI program look like, right? A company starts out in this spot, we apply DEI, and now everything looks like this. What does that look like? What is the goal of DEI?
Totally agree. I think that, and making it a priority. So I feel like all of us are saying the same thing. It's the
Well, I mean, insofar as all of you have said substantively, irate bear, nothing. Yes, you're all saying the same thing.
Priority has to be DEI. But it can't just be this siloed department. It has to be across the board.
What does that mean?
And how are we defining it? How are we?
Yeah, how are you defining it? How are you defining it? You all come from different backgrounds and different businesses and things. Okay, how do you define DEI or the goals thereof? Can you give us an example of a before and an after, a success story? Do you have a success story you can talk about? Even if you leave out the names of the company or whatever else, just like, I was involved in this thing, the company had this, and then we did the work, and then we had this. Is that so far beyond the ability to give us?
Defining that we are successful in it. It might not be those metrics that HR is looking at. And I have a feeling that's probably a bigger issue, that it is not the metric that HR is looking at, but those numbers roll up into HR. And also, what is a company doing to actually support DEI efforts outside of HR?
What should a company be doing to support DEI efforts outside of HR? In your experience, what should a company do? Examples, details. Even if it's an example that is applicable only to one industry, let's say. Okay, I don't even know if that makes any sense, but let's just say that it's different across different industries. Okay. In your experience, what has been, or should be a correct move made by a company to support DEI outside of HR? What does that look like? Hi, Carlumba. Thank you again, Hell Triangle. I'd even be happy with a chart or a PowerPoint instead of this DEI theory. Yeah, I mean, it is remarkable. And obviously it is, or else I wouldn't be talking. Just how consistent it is to listen to DEI advocates and or experts at how little they actually tell us of what DEI is, how it works, what it does.
Side of recruiting, is it something that you are truly interested in? If I were to go and look at your budget, and probably the lowest budget is in DEI, but you hired a chief diversity officer. What does that mean? Right?
Yeah, what does that? Okay, all right. Again, what should it mean? What should the role of a chief diversity officer be, in your opinion, from your experience?
Right. What does that budget include?
I don't know.
Your C-suite does not look diverse. Your interns do not look diverse. So what exactly does it mean that you hired a diversity?
Even
doesn't look diverse. Oh, well, I was under the impression that there was more to it than we don't have enough of these types of people. I must have been mistaken now. You have a chief diversity officer, but your workforce doesn't look diverse. So what are you doing? I don't know. How do you remedy this problem? There's my, again, rhetorical question for our speaker. Okay. So should the chief diversity officer's job be to ensure that the workforce looks diverse? All right. By what mechanism shall the chief diversity officer ensure the appropriate look of the workforce? I will leave that question out in the ether.
Look diverse. So what exactly does it mean that you hired a diversity
Even like giving back in community days, right? A lot of companies don't offer you community days to go and, work with your community and give back to your community, however you define that community, right?
I don't know. How should I define that community? Like a community days? Like what? Doing, I don't know, charity work or something? Like something like that? Like everybody goes and works at a soup kitchen for a day or something? Like, okay, I'd really love them to go back to the whole, your workforce doesn't look diverse.
Or for that matter, allow you to bring your team or your coworkers with you into your community to give back and to do that work.
Why does my personal life have to become my employer's business?
We were looking at a lot of studies around workplace perks because we're putting together our employment packages and are thinking a lot about in this era of working at home. What does it mean to have a perk from a company, right? The salad days, as it were, the free lunch days are kind of over if we're not all in the same place.
I don't know. What does that look? We're on a completely different topic now, but once again, all right. What does a perk look like in the remote working days? A completely different subject. I would love to know the answer to that. I don't know what that means. Maybe it's interesting.
And so, I think one of the things that ranks really highly on a lot of studies and polls is people really like the idea that they're not just being given, paid time off to go do something, that the company's actually fostering it, encouraging it, getting behind it, engaging in it with them, right? It's not just like, oh, and we'll give you an extra day off to go do whatever you want and volunteer. It's like, no, you can actually bring that mission and that imperative into the workplace and share it with your company and your colleagues and get support for that, right? And again, that comes back to being able to authentically engage with each other, I think, and understand where we're coming from, what our priorities are, what matters to us as individuals, part of a larger organization.
Okay, and this speaks to something that I've talked about a lot over the years as well, and that is the eroding of professional distance. And I've alluded to it here and there in the course of this already. Is that the line between where my workday ends and my real life begins is encouraged to be blurred by my employer, where in effect, I'm always on the clock. Because if my personal life and my personal activities, things I support, things about my personal life are encouraged to be made a part of my working day and a part of my working culture, am I ever really done with work for the day? Is it really healthy to have everything about my personal life be intertwined with my working life? Now, I don't have the answers to these questions, and they vary from person to person, company to company, and otherwise. But when it starts to become mandated, in effect, at the company you work at, that you are not allowed to participate in the idea of professional distance, I really do wonder if that's a healthy strategy in the long run.
Great points. I want to quick bring in a couple things that people have mentioned in the chat. One, briefly, I'm going to sort of reframe this a little bit. Somebody mentioned that, there was a mention about age and whatnot at the beginning of the conversation. And we need to be considering, ageism as well.
Okay. How would you consider ageism? What does that mean for this?
As far as diversity, and that, different perspectives, the big picture value of DEI should be different perspectives. And
no. You haven't talked about perspectives so far, not in any really meaningful sense. You've talked about optics. You've talked about people's lifestyles. All right. Skin color does not determine perspective. Gender does not determine perspective. Orientation does not determine perspective. Ways of thinking are not determined by these things, unless you are a various ist in those ways of thinking. And besides which, like I said, perspectives at best become secondary if anywhere in the pipeline of consideration you are putting up racial, gender, orientation, demographics in your decision making when it comes to recruitment, retention, or promotion. So, yeah, I'm sorry. It's the what is it? The poison pill. As soon as you inject that kind of discriminatory decision making into any part of this, every other aspect is secondary at best and does not escape that original sin.
Different backgrounds bring new ideas and in things to consider, important variables to consider when making important decisions and prioritizing things at a company. And age there's all sorts of different variables in that. That could be age, that could be ethnicity, that could be socioeconomic, there's so many different variables that I think often that could be something related to disability. There's so many variables that are often left out of the equation.
So where are we going with this?
And I think one thing that's sort of I've seen discussed in certain articles and things recently is the idea of we really need to even go a step further and really trying to push that, like, this is such a value add to companies, and companies need to start looking at it more that way. And I know
what is a value add to companies? DEI? Ageism? What?
Sort of said something about, like, let's not look at this use in the old ways used to be, let's look at a quota, let's check the boxes, let's make sure we're being inclusive by checking boxes, right?
Yeah, that's the old ways. None of that is employed today in any way, shape, or form, in companies, in nonprofits, in other organizations, in schools, and certainly not on the Supreme Court. No. None of that's old thinking. That doesn't happen anymore, does it?
Right. But it needs to be much more about a value add to your organization. And so I think
it needs to be only about value add on the basis of merit and ability. Elsewise, you are risking legal trouble unless you happen to be the president. What else would you want for your company but a value add when it comes to employing someone? But I guess it then does depend on what it is you are placing value on.
That's important to think about very broadly and or specifically. And then I've seen a couple people have mentioned in chat also, from a technical product perspective, there's often a lot of bias when, like,
please don't tell me you're going to, okay, and I haven't watched this. Are you going to give us an example like, women and pockets? Right? This product was designed to put in your pocket. Oh, but women never have pockets. Something like that.
Certain groups are used for testing, or when even forming questionnaires, like, or surveys when you're sending out, like, for product testing or things like that. There can be a lot of bias in those that is not intentional. But
no. It's not intentional. It's a microaggression, which is, terrible, but it's not intentional. But that doesn't really matter, right? Thank you, Zero Depressive. God bless this chat. Give us the power to defeat the woke pandemic. Help us relinquish the CRT blight that has descended on our civilization. Amen. I mean, to compare some of these things to a religious belief is totally inappropriate. Right? These abstracts, no specifics, beliefs, cultures, accountability. Yeah, no. Don't fight fire with fire there. But anyway, okay. I was waiting for the women and the pockets thing. I've seen it in a couple other things where they'll give an example of, like, without a certain perspective, you can like totally alienate your customer base. Like, we designed this product to fit in your pocket, but then we had a woman come onto the team and she's like, women don't have pockets. Oh, and we had to do a complete redesign, that kind of thing. So, yeah.
But if you had a more diverse group of people involved in that process and looking at all those considerations from different perspectives, you hopefully would catch a lot more of those things, and you would get a lot more accurate data and more fulfilling data that looks much further down the road and is much more inclusive. So,
do you tie quality of perspective to race? Do you tie quality of perspective to gender? Now, I can imagine some scenarios, right, where having someone who is either a man or a woman come in to consult on a particular thing may be relevant. If you are designing underwear for men, then yes, if your chief demographic or target demographic is men, then yeah, you'll want to design for men. And if you're designing a product for women, you'll want to have women come in. That is completely legitimate. Okay. If that's what you're talking about, okay. Or let's say you're trying to design an interface for visually impaired people to use your product. Okay. Well, you want to have people who are visually impaired in different degrees come in and work it. And yeah, that makes sense. If you're designing a product for use under the auspices of a specific need by a specific demographic, okay, fine. But tell me what the racial perspective is and how that applies. I bet there is one. I mean, maybe there is one. I don't know. Like if you're talking about like hair care products, right? Or things like that, where there's actually a physical a need that you're fulfilling. Okay, all right. But you're talking about the tech space. You're talking about nonprofits. You're talking about all these other things. I need examples. I mean, outside the obvious ones, which do not require a DEI lens. It's just a pragmatic, logical, rational lens. What does DEI do that's so special? That's my question. You guys have still not answered it after 20 minutes of this thing.
So I'm curious what y'all's thoughts are from a sort of a more, I know Abel's maybe the only one from specifically a technical background, but if anyone has any thoughts on that or experiences you can share from a technical perspective on where DEI came in as a variable.
Yes. Okay. Well, again, we have a door opened. Give us a specific example where DEI did a thing. Will we get an answer?
Or should have come in, perhaps.
Okay. Even that.
Yeah, definitely. I think
yes.
as you mentioned,
yeah.
and as folks have mentioned in the chat, bias is or unconscious bias more specifically is a huge issue within the tech industry. And a lot of that does stem from the fact that engineering teams tend to be more majority white, straight, cis male.
And what does that tell you about someone if they're a white, straight, cis male? What does that tell you about that person? I'd be curious to know.
Makeup, and thankfully over the last decade or so, that has slowly been becoming more diverse. But
okay, so white, straight, cis male is the opposite of diverse. Okay.
But yeah, a lot of unconscious bias can go into algorithms that companies are building.
I can believe it. Give me an example.
I know like one famous example is like a facial recognition software that I believe Facebook was working on that misidentified Black people's faces. And
why was that? What exactly why did that happen? The programmers were racist? Is that what you're implying? That it was unconscious? So all of the white, cis, male, straight engineers hate Black people?
Yeah. So thankfully there are some incredible people out there that are fighting against AI bias and organizations. There's one called the Algorithmic Justice League.
The Algorithmic Justice League. Oh, have they done a TEDx? I'd love to do that one.
Led by a brilliant MIT AI researcher. Her name is Joy. I don't want to mispronounce the last name, but I think it's Buamwini. I can.
Is there any other relevant factors to this person you'd like to tell us, since you're categorizing everyone by very specific factors that ensure and assure us that that she's right for this job?
Post it in the chat later. But yeah, there are lots of organizations out there for like leading the charge in terms of like applying DEI work into the technical space.
Such as?
And yeah, and it expands beyond algorithms too. Like for designing, like UX design, there's the accessibility aspect.
Yeah.
So designing for disabled folks.
Yeah.
And there's also a fairly newer concept called equitable design that
equitable design. Okay.
Started by an organization called Create a Reaction Lab. And so that
Create a Reaction Lab, is that what I couldn't tell if it was Creative Reaction Lab or Create a Reaction Lab. Okay, and what does equitable design do?
Newer concept called equitable design that was started by an organization called Create a Reaction Lab. And so that's focuses on like creating design through an equity lens.
You don't say.
Specifically, and
that's not specific. That is not specific. Equitable design means creating design through an equity lens is not specific. Oh, Lord. Come on. Cliffhanger after cliffhanger here.
And so that's focuses on like creating design through an equity lens specifically. And so yeah, I can post all of these resources in the chat.
It'd be nice if you would like explain these resources in the chat. Also, this is me waving at Legit Low Talker. Hello, I see you in the chat. I'm very focused either on the presentation or staring bewilderedly down at my keyboard with my head in my hand, but occasionally I do look at the chat during the course of the stream.
But I'll let others speak as well.
Yeah, good.
Great. I did just post the AGL website, so people can check that out. So that's one of them. That's a great resource. Yeah, to that point.
What point?
Does anybody, well, first of all, Daphne or H, do y'all have any other thoughts on that related from a technical perspective or anything else we've mentioned?
You're a great moderator, keeping people very on task with a specific subject, dude. Come on.
And or do you have any other resources? I would love for our audience to sort of take away some resources. So if you have a resource you can share in whatever area of DEI might be, or a leader that maybe people might want to follow on social for various ideas and sort of a thought leader in this space.
I would love to be a moderator on one of these talks. Okay. I swear, if anybody out there, for whatever reason, in whatever way, if there was an opportunity for me to just be a moderator, a person to pose questions, to DEI experts and so on in a panel like this, I would love to do it. I don't think I'd do a bad job at it. And I'd be as clear and, fair about it as I possibly could. I mean, I'd put people to task to answer questions, I'd probably, just for the sake of time, I'd probably give it like a 2 strikes and you're out kind of thing, where it's like I ask a question, and if I get, an actual answer back, great. If they give me a bunch of abstracts, I'll reiterate the question to them to try to get some more information. And if they still don't do it, I'll move on, kind of thing. But this is not how you moderate something like this, or anything really. You have to keep people on task, specific topic, one to the next, ask each person for their input, maybe do a follow-up, and then move on. You don't just keep shotgunning all these different things to them and say, oh, speak on this, speak on this, speak on this. That's not how it should work. I know I'm being very snobbish right now, but I can't help myself.
Anything like that you might want to share, or other thoughts to come to mind, please open up the floor. So Daphne or H, either one of you, take it away.
Abel, you made me think about so many different products.
Such as?
Just the lack of diversity in their testing.
I can believe it. Give me one. You want to talk about seatbelts? You want to talk about seatbelts and pregnant women or different sized people? That is a documented and well-known example. I can take that. Give me another one.
It's amazing. And I never even thought about it. You
never even thought about product testing for different demographics. And thank you, Johnny Hellcat. I'll give you a specific answer. Points vaguely. Yeah. It's like, it's over there somewhere. The answer to your question is out there. You have to go out there to find it. It just occurred to you? What?
I'm like, oh, that just sucks. Like I was thinking about,
going
to the airport and trying to wash my hands.
What?
Right. So I'm of a lighter skin tone than my child. So like I go and I have no problems, and she can't wash her hands. She's like, it's not working. It's not working.
What?
And it's something as simple as that.
Are you talking about the automatic, like, motion capture or motion detected, like, faucets and things? Your child's hands can't be detected? Okay, I don't know. I honestly do not know. I'm not being facetious here. Is that a thing? Is that a thing that they have yet to solve?
Can be a problem. So even just that product development and product research design, that's so important, and it affects so many different people in different ways. So thank you for that. And
okay, so I'm not even still just bewildering on the whole light sensitive automatic faucet thing. Until Abel said that, you hadn't thought about that? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. We just talked about it.
As far as Brad, your question about people I follow, I am horrific with names. So this is what I do for my.
Well, now here's the danger, and we learned this not too long ago on a TED Excellence. If you say their name wrong, that indicates a racial bias. So be very careful on what you're about to say. Just want to make that clear. And I think as you're depressive, I think we can agree that these people will never be satisfied. Well, I mean, it would be nice to know what it is that they want to achieve. What is the goal, right? You come into the company and things are like this. And the ideal situation is for things to be like this. So what does that second stage look like? We haven't even gotten that yet. We've had it teased. We haven't gotten it.
Myself. My favorite platform is LinkedIn. So I'll go on LinkedIn and I follow those hashtags specifically.
Oh.
And the reason why is because then I find a lot of information and I get to interact and engage with people that might not be typically famous, but have a wealth of knowledge and some really great networking.
Yeah, like me. I'm not famous. I have a wealth of knowledge on all types of things, mostly Marvel comic books and Vampire the Masquerade and DEI rhetoric. I can network. I mean, some people pay attention to me on YouTube and social media. So yeah, so I can fall into that category. Oh, wait, I'm not on LinkedIn. No, I guess I don't count.
So I follow diversity, inclusion.
No. Diversity, equity, and inclusion. D&I has gone the way of the dodo.
Inclusivity.
Yeah.
Let's see what else. I try to.
Do you follow equity? Do you follow, DEI? Or my favorite right now, the one that is slowly coming to the fore is belonging. Right? I've talked about this before. Now, JEDI, justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, has been put a big no-no on it by Scientific American. So and because it's too corporate, it's too related to, sci-fi nerd stuff. So I think they're searching for that. My suggestion: diversity, equity, belonging, inclusion. Debbie. I'm just putting that out there. If somebody else wants to brand it or whatever, Debbie. It's coming. If it hasn't happened already, it is coming.
I try to do DEI. So like I follow all of these hashtags just to see what is actually happening in the world. And it's really helpful because
it's a very cloistered echo chamber.
There are situations that you would have never thought about.
Like
you might even be doing, because that's the other thing with unconscious bias. Like we're all in this room and we have our own things, but there might be things that we're doing and we don't even realize it.
Yeah, until somebody tells you that you're doing the wrong thing, even though you had no intention of doing it at all, and somebody decides to take offense. And then what do? You have to change your whole outlook on life because you said a thing that somebody else decided was a problem. Oh my God.
And I'm like, oh my goodness, was I one of those people? Wow. But it's okay if we acknowledge it.
Is it though? Is it okay? I mean, if you acknowledge it, that just shows your ignorance. That just shows your unconscious bias. That just shows how you've been unknowingly feeding into a system of oppression and discrimination this entire time. And how do you know that something else you're always doing isn't doing that too? Until someone else tells you that you're doing it wrong. I mean, is there any correct move to make? I don't think so.
And then we try to do better, right?
Yes, better. As defined by the complainant, yes.
Yeah, in terms of resources, I would say one great resource is Jennifer Brown. She's written a couple of books on DEI in the workplace specifically.
Wait, Jennifer Brown. Didn't I do? Okay, okay, this might be the cobwebs of my brain, but if I'm not mistaken, I think her name was Jennifer Brown. An old talks at Google I did. It was something like "She Are the Champion" or something. I think that was the title. Man, my memory. If that's correct, I'm giving myself an all-star pass right there. Okay, so if somebody wants to look up on my channel right now, "She Are the Champion," I think that's the title. If that lady's name is Jennifer Brown, oh man, I have been doing this way too goddamn long.
LGBTQIA, DEI. She's actually a friend of mine since college, so I know her well. I'll give her the shameless plug here. You can go to her website. I think it's called Jennifer Brown Consulting, maybe. And she does a tremendous amount of work on DEI within organizations like we're talking about today. Now,
I'm okay. After she said that, I am 95% sure that's exactly who that video was on. Oh, I just blew my own mind.
The recruiting aspect, but the culture, retention, how to build a really amazing workplace.
Oh. Hold on. Plague Dr. Zach, it's Jennifer Brown. It is. Keeverdam gives up the video. Oh my gosh. I can't believe it. I'm so proud of myself. I mean, I have this, it's not really a secret fear. I've talked about it before. There is a pattern of Alzheimer's in my family. And so one of my sort of background notions throughout the course of my entire life has been, at some point, everything is going to disappear and my brain is just going to rot away. That's why I'm always really excited when they put out news of a new Alzheimer's treatment, cure, or something. But I'm always very wary of those things. Anyway, the fact that she just says that one of the most probably generic names you can think of, right? It's like Robert Smith or something. And all of a sudden I'm like, is that lady I looked at like 5 years ago now in that one video at that one time for that one thing? Oh, that's great.
And with regard to DEI in the specifically in the entertainment industry, if anybody's looking for more information or stats on that, USC's Annenberg School puts out a really well documented study every year about diversity in the entertainment business.
I did something with that too. Oh man. It was it the Cinematriarchy? I did a TEDx way back when. I think the title of the video I put on was Cinematriarchy, and I think the lady in there referenced the Annenberg study. Man, if I'm whoa. Okay, H.P. Lovecraft was right. When you can correlate all the contents of your mind, it is a scary, scary experience. If I'm right about that too, I'm having a day.
It has a lot of very helpful statistics and information on how we're doing in media and entertainment, which oftentimes is not well.
Yeah, not well by what standards? I think actually that's a major part of the video I did. Even if it's not the UC Annenberg study, it's similar.
Yeah, great resources and great ideas. I will.
Okay, you know, the little visual problem at the top of the screen there with his head going outside the realm of whatever. It looks like he's got a little mohawk going on. I don't know if anybody else sees that too.
+1 for sure. What Daphne said as far as LinkedIn, I use LinkedIn a lot for finding great resources as well as, you know, thought leaders. And looking at the content, there's such a high value of content on LinkedIn when it comes to the, you know, a business perspective.
If you say
I think it's so underutilized. People need to be using LinkedIn a lot more for that purpose.
Oh yeah, nobody uses LinkedIn for business. What? Are you just talking about your organization? I'm okay.
A few specific ones I will throw out there that I specifically follow.
Seriously, a bibliography's just. We're not even halfway through your whole presentation, and we're already talking about resources. That's the kind of stuff you talk about at the end of a presentation, where other people can consult these things for information.
Follow regularly. Organization is at one organization's Out Leadership.
Okay.
Is a great organization to follow across all their social, and they're very much focused on sort of the hierarchy and impact and statistics and data related to the impact that having not just queer leadership, but all diverse leadership, but with an emphasis on LGBTQ+.
Not just about this demographic, but with a focus on this demographic. Okay.
You know, from boards and C-level down, and then also how is that implemented across the different organizations within companies?
Yeah,
a lot of what we talked about. And then there's a great podcast called the Color of Success podcast, which is very kind of specific.
The Color of Success podcast is very specific. I wouldn't have imagined.
But it's related to destigmatizing mental health discussions among ethnic minorities as they advance their careers. So,
okay, I'll give you that. That is very specific.
It's great to get that perspective and resources, and also sort of building a community of people, like-minded individuals.
Okay, we're literally at the 30-minute mark on the video of a just under an hour presentation, and I'm at the hour and a 30-minute mark and a 30-minute mark of my presentation. So do I make this a part 2? Do we have a collective interest in hearing more from our speakers? Let me know in the comments. for those of you listening in the future. I'll take a minute or two here to wrap up for anything you guys have to say. And I will consider it. I will consider it because, these are people given my memory game today, I'm almost certain I've seen Abel in another one of these panel discussions before. I'm like, again, 95% certain I've seen Abel before. But other than him, everybody else are people that I've never heard from before. So I'll think about it. But you guys let me know. Let's see. Kiever Dem says, I say try a part 2. All right. Mike R says 1. Is that a 1 in affirmation of a part 2 or what? So Memnil Nation says no because Darth Vader and Padme's dead. What? I don't know. Let's see. Lexi Mad says, what is this even supposed to be about? It is supposed to be about designing a holistic DEI strategy for your business. That was the title. That was the promise. We've yet to get to anything that talks about how to design, etc., for your business. So I don't have any faith I'm going to hear that in the second half. But if it is going to be in this, it's obviously going to be somewhere in the second half. So I don't know. Do I do another part? Do I keep listening to it? Scanner Daffley. I mean, if you have nothing else lined up, at least you wouldn't have to worry about what to do next week. This is also true. This is also true. So, maybe nothing will arise between now and next Sunday. So we'll see. And Zemzem, Lexi has the right idea. Lexi usually has the right idea until she doesn't. You be the judge. And let's see. And some ammunition. Have they even addressed holisticism, which sounds like some kind of magical practice? No. I honestly, except for the lady at the very beginning, who I guess was just the organizer, and I'm not 100% sure. I'm not sure anyone here has actually said the word holistic. I might be mistaken. But with that, everyone, I'm going to call it here. Did we learn anything? Well, I sure learned that my memory isn't as janky as I thought it used to be. I think. Maybe. You tell me. We also learned that, once again, you get a collective of DEI experts and or advocates in a room to discuss DEI, and you can't even understand what DEI is meant to be or do with 30 minutes of talk, which I guess shouldn't be a surprise to me at this point. But as I said at the beginning, I keep looking at these things on the off chance I'm finally going to get some concrete answers. Because it's like waiting for that bus. The bus is late, but it's if I leave, if I walk away, that's when the bus is going to show up. So anyway, everyone, again, thank you for joining me. You guys are the greatest audience in the world. Moderators, thank you for keeping an eye on things. Even though everyone here is so well behaved, except for those Russian bots, you have very little to do. Everyone who donated, thank you so much for your generosity. I really appreciate it. In that vein, please take a look, if you haven't already, to the link at the top of the chat box to the GoFundMe to help out Shady Grin's friends. They could use some assistance if you have it available to donate. And with that, everyone, hope you have a good rest of your Sunday. Hope you have a good rest of your weekend. Hope for those of you that have to deal with month end on Monday and or Tuesday, hope it goes all right. If you'd like to hear more from me, you can find me again Thursday night on this channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for another installment of TED Excellence, where I'll once again look at an off-brand TED Talk for our education and entertainment. I call it education. Yes, that's what I call it. I hope you're all safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye, guys.